All right. Good morning. Welcome everyone back to another $1 million coffee hour. And today we are really diving in. One of the things that I want to kind of set the room, if you will, in regards to the biggest retirement blind spots that's costing people time, peace, and your money at the end of the day. And one of the things really leading up to the workshop that I have coming up Tuesday, we're really going to be diving in on TSP and 401k and how you can surcharge your retirement account. So I'm really looking forward to next Tuesday. But I really wanted to kind of talk about the rationale behind it. And we see a lot of this going on right now with some of the discussions around the government shutdown, where we see job loss is running rampant. We see individuals with losing jobs where they have pensions, or in a lot of positions where they don't even have pensions. Their pension isn't the word isn't even in the conversation. And so right now, in regards to 401ks, and a lot of individuals, they had qualified retirement accounts, so 401ks for a lot of corporations, or for the federal employees, TSP, that are no longer with those organizations. And so I thought would be a really good time, especially some of the conversations and questions that I received, how to take back control of those capital that you have in those retirement accounts, and really how can you invest things smartly, and what are some of the strategies that the wealthy are using today and have used for a long time to build wealth. And so that really hits home on everything has been going on. I think one of the, looking back at the news, there's a lot of discussion now about the 50-year mortgage from the current administration. And so people are kind of thinking outside the box. We are right now, I would say, in an unprecedented era right now in regards to the economy, inflation, artificial intelligence, the replacement of jobs, entire career fields, as well as just looking at overall that at the same time, when you're looking at the production of the economy, that now we're talking about less jobs, and at the same time people being laid off. And so I think for a lot of people that are impacted, they're where you're going to have to look at, be creative in how you show up in the workplace, how you create your own economy, and how you take back control of your resources. So that's driving today's conversation. Then we'll kind of open it up and chat here afterwards, and really kind of see what you guys want to talk about. I know we had a great discussion last week with Jim Gibbs from CoStar. So if you didn't catch that video, definitely check out that recording about the power of data and how individuals are using data to build their portfolios, even in this unpredictable market and economy that we operate in today. So with that, really, for those that haven't met me, for those on the live stream, that I'm Johnny Lynham, founder of REI Genius, financial advisor, retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force, and we also house the Financial Freedom Network within the community as well, too, all centered around helping individuals build wealth. And so for 20 years now, serving in the Air Force, and had a paycheck, had the benefits. I knew, once you get to a certain point, you're vested, that you're going to be able to retire. And for me, I made the conscientious decision, staying in, around that 12-year mark, that it made sense to stay in and just kind of grind it out. Although, leading my fix and flip business, buying apartment complexes and doing those things, it made sense to, work it in, pace myself, if you will, to make sure you kind of coexist and being able to accomplish both things simultaneously. But I know at the end of the day, deep down, that I wanted more control, I wanted more freedom, and more purpose at the same time. And and so that was the rationale with creating the Financial Freedom Network and building out REI Genius, to help other people do the same thing. And so, today we're going to dive into those top five, the largest reasons I see right now that those retirement blind spots that cost you time, money, and peace of mind, and showing you how to fix them at the same time. And then we'll talk a little bit more about next week with the opportunity with the 401k TSP deep dive, and how that can help you take back control of everything that's building with your retirement account. So looking at the data, when most people think about retirement, they focus on really one thing, and it's the accumulation of wealth, the number in their account. But at the end of the day, when you really think about financial freedom and financial security and what it really means when you start talking about, your money lasting and you're not having to work until you're 60, 70, 80, 90 years old, the number in the account isn't really that important. But at the end of the day, it's not the number, it's the freedom of time, it's the confidence and income, and then it's the peace of mind that comes with your retirement account. But the problem today, and we talked a little bit about it, some of the things that we don't control. But when we look at what we can control about our finances, those blind spots that they drain away in those three areas that I talked about. And a lot of times you don't see them. And we all know that they can derail even the best of financial plans. And so when you look at it and kind of poll the survey, 60% feel behind that when it comes to retirement savings, when they look at the account, they look back and have some regret in what they were doing in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s and then maybe in their 50s. One in three Americans, I think we have like 350 Americans, in the US. So one in three, so well over 100 million depend on Social Security solely as their only means. And then 20% reduction in retirees for when it comes to looking at the purchasing power that has been reduced just the last 5 years. And we know inflation, even that we know, I won't say that we know that the number they tell us isn't necessarily always the number, but there's a lot, it's really nuanced. There's a lot of variables that go into calculating inflation. And I can tell you from my household, you see it. You just see the price of fuel, the price of eggs, bread, groceries, everything. When you go to the store, just everything is a lot more expensive, and that's just happens with inflation. And so that's one of the things that we really have to focus in on. How do we make our money? How do we stretch our money long term to get out there? And so that'll kind of take us into blind spot number one, and really kind of starting that dive in. And so the first blind spot is relying heavily on the stock market and Social Security. And I think really when you start looking at, where everything is at and looking at the traditional method that all your money is lumped into the market, whether it's your TSP or your 401k, that you set your allocation. A lot of times when you sign on with the company, and a lot of people, they never go back and look at it. I talked about last week that, there's $1.6 trillion of forgotten 401ks that are left in retirement accounts that people forgot about. They've gone on, left the employer, and forgotten that they had a retirement account, and that money is just sitting there dormant. No, they don't know. They don't even. A lot of people don't even know they have it, and they surely don't know what it's actually invested in. And so that's one of the things when you're looking at the autopilot problem, that a lot of people just set it, forget it. They don't do the allocation. They're not looking and having a true understanding of what's happening in the current market and properly allocate to make sure that they don't have an overexposure to risk, that they're managing their portfolio in a way where they're having a balanced approach and they're truly diversified. Silent wealth killers. So hidden fees, persistent inflation, market volatility, it's all eating away at your returns year after year. And the one big one in there, the hidden fees, and one of the hidden fees that a lot of people don't talk about is the fee on the back end. And that's one that not really having a holistic plan, where a lot of people forget about the taxes. That, the government has a mandatory distribution date, whether you need the money out of there or not, because they want to start getting the tax revenue off the money that you've built up over the years. And so not having a strategy can leave you extremely vulnerable on the back end when you do have to start taking distribution. Persistent inflation. I talk about this one all the time, that the Federal Reserve's goal is to keep inflation at 2%. They haven't done a good job. They haven't been there. And there's been a lot of reasons why that hasn't happened. But their goal is to keep inflation at 2%. So for a decade, 10 years, 20% purchasing power in 10 years. And we just talked about, 20%. Unfortunately, we've lost 20% of buying power in only 5 years, just because of quantitative easing. There was a lot of money that was printed, after COVID to keep the economy afloat. And when you have that amount of income continue to increase, you end up with a lot of inflation. And we've seen that when you have inflation, that asset prices increase. And we see that with real estate, the stock market, just owning real tangible assets. When you have more money circulating in the economy, guess what? Those same goods, those same assets, they cost more, especially when money's cheap. And then the real risk is when you really look at it, at the end of the day, that is the complacency and inaction, not getting the information, not knowing how to allocate your retirement accounts, not understanding self-directed IRAs. When you leave an employer, how you can do a rollover, custodian to custodian rollover, move that money where you have control over the investments that you're investing in, where you're not just stuck on the roller coaster ride that comes um, with the stock market. And so the thing is, most retirement accounts need attention. You can't put it on autopilot, and really go through with the slow cooker approach where you're just sitting there and you just wait it out and you're not paying attention to it, because that is an ultimate recipe for failure at the end of the day. So blind spot two, saving versus, and I think this one is, really understanding that when you look at replacing income, that it's not about saving, it's about growing and understanding how you can grow it in a way where the assets are producing real income from day one, and where you're not just hoping and praying for just appreciation along the way. And so I think one of the big items here is really focusing in on the opportunity for alternative assets that can pay you, like real estate, private markets, where you look at wealth. I'm preparing for a presentation. I think it was the Delta Sigma Theta organization here in the DC area. They're doing a community investing event. And one of the conversations we put in the slides together really centered on, the power of the alternative investments, but really focusing in on the private markets. It's a slide, and I've shown you guys this slide before, that really just shows the breakout of what the top 1%, the top 20%, what are they investing in? And when you look at private markets and just the overall allocation of high net worth individuals, that they have a larger exposure and allocation to private markets. And when you start looking at real estate, private equity, private credit opportunities, as well as oil and gas, and where they're diversified outside of the stock market, where there are other investments that aren't necessarily correlated to the stock market. So if the stock market drops 20%, that doesn't necessarily mean that your cash flow is going to drop 20%. That's coming in from oil and gas or from a private credit transaction that you have, where you're in a real estate private equity fund that's lending money to property that's paying you 8 to 9% a year on your money, not necessarily tied directly to the stock market. And so one of those things with that diversification allows you to be ride those waves when things happen. When the market corrects and drops 10, 15, 20% in one year, you're not overly exposed to those large changes. And I think being able to think from a cash flow perspective and understanding how that rolls in and how your allocation is made, that it sets you up for long-term success. And I think, when I talk a little about this, your success isn't measured by just logging to your account and seeing what your balance is, but it's depending is really looking in like how can I depend on the income that's being generated from this large uh, amount of money that I have, this capital that I have in the account. What's backing it? What real assets do I own? How are those assets paying me? And so, better understanding that is really going to provide that confidence for you to be able to sleep soundly at night, and knowing that you're not overexposed to a market correction that now can wipe out your potential to leverage that income, that capital for income in retirement. And I think, kind of into that, talked about this from blind spot number three, is really looking at the taxes and understanding the impact of taxes. And we all know I know in Virginia, we pay personal property tax on your vehicles, you pay property taxes, you have sales tax, you have your income tax in the state, you have your federal income tax, you have your tax that they have on capital gains that you make on your investments. And then you have just all these different taxes that you're paying, and it is truly the silent thief. And a lot of times that we look at the tax deferment, but a lot of times we don't look at how we leverage the Roth component. We don't look at how we can roll over smartly, different strategies. We can roll over existing 401k money into Roths, and where we can offset those taxes by maybe investing in an asset class like oil and gas, where you get an instant tax break on your gross income, or you can reduce your exposure and move that money into a Roth component, where now is growing completely tax free for the rest of your life. And so looking at different strategies and understanding that, because there is a mandatory distribution age. And so that's mandatory for a reason where now having to start to pay taxes on the money that you saved up. They don't want you just to save the money up and then just hand it off to your next generation if you don't need it. And so there's taxes that you're going to have to pay. And if you don't have a strategy for that, then you're going to leave yourself overly exposed. We talked already about the silent thief and what $100 dwindles down to 10, 20, 30 years from now. You may be paying $50 for, in a drastic, you see these different societies where their currency crashes, where you're having to take a wheelbarrow full of money. And can you guys hear me now? So the AirPod went out. I think you guys can hear me now. But the big one is, you see societies where they lose the currency, and the currency becomes worthless. And after that point, you realize that hey, it takes $100 to buy a loaf of bread, and that's the last thing that you want to happen. But that happens with inflation because the money becomes worthless. And we talked about how the Federal Reserve goal is to keep it at 2%. And the last few years, it hasn't stayed at 2%. And some, I think at the height of coming out of COVID, that inflation got up to 9%, I think in 2022. And so the thing is, you have to understand how do you hedge against inflation? And one of the great ways to do that is by owning real assets. And one of the best real assets out there is real estate. And we saw it coming out of COVID that we had appreciation on average across the U.S. ran up somewhere from 35 to 40% increase in prices just because there was more money and it forced inflation across the economy. And those that own real estate and own real assets were the real benefits from that. And then lastly, plan now, pay later. That having a tax efficient withdrawal strategy now while you're still working gives you far more control and flexibility than waiting until retirement. Because if you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail. Whether that's in a military operation, that's a plan for a vacation, not having a plan when you go on vacation, or not having a plan for your retirement, you're setting yourself up for failure. And none of us knowingly want to set ourselves up for failure. And I think, one of the going into blind spot number four, getting real life costs, this is huge. And I really took a deep dive into it and kind of looking at long-term care facilities and the business model there and nursing home as well too. And just understanding the long-term healthcare costs that, right now, like in the state of Maryland, I think on average, you could easily be paying anywhere from seven to $9,000, if not more, per month to be living in a facility. And so a lot of times, having one spouse that can, need long-term care for an extended amount of time, that it can drastically change your financial picture and and reduce your overall plan that you had for not financial freedom. And so one of the things that really going through and understand is how are you overexposed for long-term costs? Do you have proper long-term care riders on your insurance policies? To whereas that you have that in place where you don't have to drain your retirement that maybe both you and your spouse are needing in going into your 60s, 70s, 80s, and the upper years. And the thing is that you have to plan for this. If you don't plan for it, you're going to be in a lot of trouble because everyone's people living longer. And at some point right now, they're saying 70% of us retirees are going to need some form of long-term care. So it's quite likely it's going to happen. But if you don't have a plan in place for these unexpected costs, then you're going to be sacrificing your stability and peace of mind that you've worked so hard to build. And so I think really understanding holistically where things are at. And I think one of this that goes into it is really, we talk about in society right now, like the number one driver of the government shutdown has been insurance costs and the impact of rising insurance premiums. And the reason when you think about it, that you look at the processed food, a lot of the content that goes into the food supply that we have here as Americans, that a lot of times you can argue that the food is killing us. And look at from where we were 20, 30, 40 years ago, and just the ramp up in different ailments like diabetes, looking at heart failure, obesity and things along that nature, just as an American society, that now are putting a drag on overall healthcare, the insurance premiums that we pay as a country. And with that, it puts us in a position where you're going to need long-term care just because of the ailments. And I know for me, it was definitely a wake-up call, kind of as I was going on my exit out of the military and going through doing the routine blood work that had elevated A1C level, where I was pre-diabetic. I'm like, how the heck am I pre-diabetic? But looking at the food that you're eating and the routine that you have in regards to exercise, and not fasting, and the power to change body composition and your just overall health, and the right supplements that you're taking that prevent you from being someone that needs to actually go in and be a recipient of the different healthcare and medicines and things like that. And so making those changes and being more conscientious allows us to kind of avoid some of those things. But we definitely have to keep to account long-term care when we're moving forward with our overall retirement planning for the out years. And then I think blind spot number 5, it goes back to just overall knowledge and the information with just not knowing what's there, and just understanding what are the hidden opportunities that I don't know about a retirement account with my current employer, or my past retirement accounts that I had with previous jobs. And then understanding what are the legal strategies out there? How are the wealthy doing it? How are they preserving wealth? I had a conversation with a networking conversation yesterday with a gentleman that works with tax strategists and how they help high net worth individuals save on capital gains taxes, legal strategies that are out there that allows you to get back more control, but also keep your hard earned money in your pocket and not turn it over to the government legally. And then I think knowledge is equal to freedom, and just knowing the different strategies. I talked last week, when was having a discussion in one of the videos that we put out on YouTube about the $1.6 trillion in qualified plans, those 401ks and TSPs that a lot of people don't even know they still have. And I gave the story of one individual that I learned at a conference I did back in September at a Charm Real Estate conference in North Alabama, and how they discussed about how this one individual he had $70,000 roughly in his plan that he had from retirement, and he used subject to creative strategies, and he went and bought I think it was a total of 8 properties in Austin, Texas, and this was 2012 timeframe. And over the next couple of years, he took that money, bought these properties, rented them out over the years, and now he's built up a portfolio in his self-directed IRA. That's the value of those assets is over $4 million. And we're just talking about over a 13, 14-year time frame, with being able to just take those strategies, buy a handful of assets, and then just let time happen, manage those properties, let the tenants pay down the debt, and bring in the cash flow into his retirement account. And now appreciation happen over time in Austin, Texas. And of course, that's how you build freedom, is having the strategies, having the wealth building vehicles like the self-directed IRAs, and having the knowledge and legal strategies to help you build your nest egg going into the future. And so really understanding all your options, it isn't about taking unnecessary risk. It's about making informed, intentional decisions with your hard-earned money that you've been saving all these years. And there is a cost of doing nothing. And compounding, it works both ways. We talked about the eighth wonder of the world with compounding, but guess what? If you're compounding the wrong way, you're not making decisions, it's going to magnify the losses and the missed opportunities over. Every counts. The best time to start investing was when you're a teenager, and the next best time is today, because we can't go back in time and make up for lost time, but we can start changing our behaviors, and we can start making up for that inaction and start building that cash flow and that ability to save and build up our investments so we don't have to work until we die. And just understanding that delaying does have a price. And a lot of times, unfortunately, most people, they realize that when it's too late. So don't let that be you guys here that's watching today and kind of taking this in, because today is truly the best day that you have control. Because guess what? We may not have done what we wanted to do in the past, but tomorrow's not promised. And the only thing that's guaranteed for us right now is today. And especially if we're looking at like the loved ones that we have, how we can set up an estate plan with wills and trusts to protect the assets, as well as insurance in place to make sure, when that time happens, that our families are properly cared for and they have everything in place where they're not left in a bad position where they're struggling and not able to move forward. So the things that you can talk about, we're talking about today, how they can fix this is really, showing up here, getting the information, understanding what's out there, and getting back control. Going to take a look today, logging in and seeing what do you have in your 401k account, what do you have in your TSP, and understanding, do you have the right strategy, do you have the right mix when it comes to diversification? Are you taking on too much risk? Are you not taking enough risk to grow and appreciate your assets? And then really understanding, creating a plan and having that predictability and control, and being intentional and not risky, and understanding that you're not going to just make it up all overnight, that you're not just taking your money to Vegas and rolling the dice and try to put all your money on black, white, the roulette on the roulette table. But the thing is really having the tools in your hand and having the information so you can make informed decisions and become the best CEO of your life. With that, I would and join the Supercharger TSP 401k workshop next week, Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. Share this information. And it's all about helping you supercharge those retirement accounts, understanding what's out there with self-directed ways, how you can create steady income that's supercharging those retirement vehicles, and allows you to keep your job and build in multiple income streams without quitting your current position. And I think really understanding that diversity and mindset and how you're approaching everything and how you're approaching build wealth, that is going to be extremely critical to build wealth in this ever dynamic environment that we're operating in right now in our economy. And then for those that you like, hey, maybe you don't have a plan, you don't have a financial plan, like maybe you have one and you're like, I need to update this, I get more guidance, get a little bit more clarity. Would love for you to get on my calendar so we can have a conversation and really kind of go through and help build out their personal strategy and see what that looks like and see how we can help get to that next level. With that, that is all that I had to share with you guys and kind of walk through these slides to really tee up the conversation and then just see what questions we have out there. We have definitely had some time to answer questions and really just kind of go a little bit deeper in the discussion on what you guys are, talking about, what you have seen, maybe some changes that you have made and how you operate your TSP or your 401k. And there may be a benefit to kind of give other individuals some clarity. Let's see, I'll take this off the stage in the meantime and see what questions we have. Yes, Sherelle. No, I'm definitely looking forward to the conversation. And I think that's one of the things that you really look at. And I know, like, for me, having a TSP, that I used the TSP back in 2015. I took out the loan against my TSP to start my business when we did our first fix and flip. That was one of the resources that I leveraged in order to start my fix and flip business. Because when I looked at the return on was getting 2015, you may have been getting like 7% return on the fund and the money. It's like, I can take this money, fix and flip a property, and put 30,000 in and make 2,000 and get over 100% return on my money. So I'm like, why would I keep my money to TSP and put it in the market if I can take this money in just 1 year and go buy a house and flip it and sell it and double my money 100% return? And so when I started looking at how Wall Street was set up, and once I got the information and I had the mindset shift and took the leap of faith to invest in myself and understanding how I can apply that with just buying a simple $50,000-$60,000 house and adding value to it and then selling it or refinancing and keeping it as a rental property. And that changed how I approach everything that I do in regards to investments and Wall Street and understanding. And I'll tell you, I've evolved now. We're looking at opportunities for more diversification of real estate because it's great to build up in real estate and and, and the wealth change with the market with interest rates rising, as well as when you refinance and different opportunities where you have opportunities to diversify. And so that's the things that I'm looking at right now with selling my first apartment complex, my 18 unit in Panama City, where my return on equity is less than 2%. look at the cash flow that the property it makes, and I compare it to the trap equity there, I'm getting less than a second and reinvest in asset classes, and I can essentially invest, 40% of the money and get the same return that I'm getting right now with just putting it away and doing nothing without taking any risk. And so that's the things that really have to look at. And a lot of times we don't talk about the return on equity calculation, but a lot of times we just what's the return on investment. But even after like you refinance, you take all your asset, and you in this case, we were able to pull out multiple 100K on top of our initial investment out, and you're still getting horrible return on equity. It's like, okay, and you've exhausted, the I would say, at least 40-50% of the tax benefit the first 5 years with 100% bonus depreciation. It's a great time to sell. And so that's what you have to look at, and make sure that you're looking at your investors from a holistic perspective and how you can diversify, where now you're able to keep everything in balance with risk, and continue to look for different opportunities to buy more value add apartments, and the velocity of money where you can take it and you can full appreciation in another apartment building and increase the value of another $1 million or $2 million asset 30-40% in a short amount of time, and kind of keep that money going. And so the thing is, you just got to constantly looking at your portfolio, the returns that you're getting, that you have trapped, and make conscious decisions on what's the best asset and the way to move forward. And so I think that's always at top of mind when you're going through as an investor, to make sure you're understanding your metrics and how everything's building, and are you overexposed to risk in certain areas. And so that's one of the things you look at with diversification now, that you can invest in institutionally managed real estate funds that are out there. You have different oil and gas, you have private credit, where people where funds are lending money to businesses and organizations. And you just have ETFs, you have crypto ETF, where you just get exposure to a lot of different assets. And now just having that proper diversification just allows you to protect your nest egg, continue to grow your wealth in a safe and non-correlated way. And I always talk about Tony Robbins' book, The Holy Grail of Investing. Definitely check that one out. But it talks about the Holy Grail of Investing. And he interviewed billionaires that run a lot of the private equity funds, hedge funds on Wall Street, as well as CEOs of major companies. And he talked about the Holy Grail of investing is having 7 uncorrelated investments. And they talk about the different investments when you start looking at private equity, secondaries, private credit, real estate, REITs, and just all these different offerings that you can bring in and have in regards to how you're building your wealth. So there's a lot out there to get informed about, and that's why we're having these discussions. For those online, definitely tap into the Financial Freedom Network to get connected, and in networking and building community with like-minded investors. And we will see you guys on the next coffee hour. So let's make some equity happen.